What is up, party people? Welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Thanks for coming along, joining us, having a beer, having some conversations. We are going to jump right into the show. If you have a comment, a question, we'd love to know what you're drinking. Just go ahead and drop it in the comments there. We'll give him a formal introduction. Those who have been listening to the show for a while know our buddy Thomas from Schoolhouse. He's going to join us to talk about some beer laws this week. So, without further ado, or maybe a little bit of ado, while I get, I'm never ready, Nate. I'm never ready. I start running my mouth before I get my software things in place. But
Some ado is what's
ado
happening.
is due. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody, to the Beer Guys Radio Show. It is good to be here, and it's good to have you with us for Craft Beer Conversations. I am Tim Dennis. Brian Hewitt, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm good, man. I'm good. And Mo Mike Nate, how are you?
Well, happy to be here.
Good, man. Good. And I am going to introduce our special guest this week. He's been, Thomas, I want to apologize to you because you did a show with this month or two ago and we had technical difficulties and it didn't make it. It didn't make, I emailed you. So we had the live show and it went, but our recorded audio was garbled. So the actual podcast didn't go out. So we had the live show. Thomas is like, oh, wow, I didn't know. I'm breaking the news to him right now. So I invited him to join us again. I was like, hey, man, if you want to join us again soon. But I thought maybe he was mad at us that he'd wasted his time and just wasn't talking to me. So, but
I can't be mad at you guys.
I appreciate that, man. Thomas has got beer and pinball, so he's one of our good buddies. But Thomas is joining us this week because we have a new beer bill up in Georgia. And although this is local news, beer laws impact everybody. And we're definitely not the only state that fights for these kind of things. So we're going to, in very short order, jump into this and start the show off talking with some beer laws. Before we do that, let's talk about the beers we're drinking this week. Thomas, what are you sipping on?
I've got actually two that I'm going to be sipping on tonight. First, Thirst Responder, 5% American lager. We actually traditionally lager it, so it sits in a tank for about 60 days. It's a lot of fun. I love that beer. It's one of my favorites. And then we have Brewtang.
It's nothing to mess with, is it?
Yeah, craft beer rules everything around me.
Good stuff, man.
So this one is not for children either. So just FYI.
Right.
Yeah, it's got an NC-17 on it. Yes. That's what I'm drinking.
Good stuff. Well, guys, I'm going to go because I want to give a shout out to Tom Rhodes. And Tom hit us up on Instagram a few weeks ago. Brian shared a story about Quick Trip, the convenience store launching their own beer called Quittin' Time. And we put out a cry for help to any of our listeners in Oklahoma that could get their hands on this beer that we would absolutely love to try it. And Tom was nice enough to hit us up and say, hey, guys, I'd be happy to send you some beer. So he sent Brian, you're happy because he sent you a long beer. And so when Friday comes around, you got a long beer there. And then we've got, he sent us a 6-pack of cans of Quittin' Time, which is a premium beer. And Brian, you mentioned the brewery earlier. Who did this one?
Marshall Brewing in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay, very cool. And he also sent us a cream ale from, I am absolutely not going to say this name right, but Kokendorfer Brewing Company. And he'd heard us talk about our love for Jenny Cream. And he said he wanted to send this along as what he thought was a really good example of the style. So, Tom, you're the best. We've got to get by our office storage, and get some swag together. We got T-shirts and stuff there. We're going to send you a swag pack out soon. But thanks for thinking of us. Thanks for listening to the show. And thanks for sharing some beers with us. And Brian, related, that's my beer of the week, man. I'm sipping on Quittin' Time right now. What are you drinking?
I also had one, but that was my pregame. I was setting things up. I was drinking on that. It's a cream ale. It's a great beer. Really enjoyed that. Would definitely get more of it should it become more widely available. Not going to make Tom Rhodes ship us out, in on the regular.
Just keep it, subscription.
Yeah, that's too much to ask anybody. But So now I am working on a collaboration between WeldWorks and Parish Brewing. I love me some Parish beers. I'm a fanboy these days. This one is extra Bayou Juice, which is a hazy DIPA with Cascade, Citra, Eldorado, Mosaic, and Simcoe hops, and it's wonderful. It's great, as you would expect from a New England IPA from either of those places. So together they're unstoppable. And after that, perhaps later after the show with the Patreon folks, I will be getting into a Three Taverns 11th anniversary barley wine, which is gasp. It's an American style barley wine, and I know
illegal.
I know that I've had this, and I like it. I'm not angry at it. I do prefer the English style barley wines a little bit more, but I like this one. They did good work with it, and I will be drinking on that later. I think it's Mike Nate. What are you drinking?
So I am drinking a phenomenal collaboration from WeldWorks and Parish Brewing Company called Extra Bio Juice. I saw this drop and I just always love these collaboration beers. I did not have a pregame beer that I could have, but perhaps in the after party show with our patron supporters, I'll break into this Three Taverns 9th anniversary barley wine, and I know gasp that it is. A little taboo to have an American barley wine, but I think there's an echo in here.
Are you guys twinsying up? Did you guys coordinate? What are you wearing tonight? I don't know. What are you wearing?
I put my stuff in first. There was nothing there in the list of beers being consumed before.
Yeah.
So I'm not the echo here. I'm the original sound.
And related to our beers of the week, we want to give a shout out to our friends at Three Taverns who are opening their third tavern. And it's always been kind of a joke here in Atlanta area, where's the third tavern? They have 2 locations right now, but we've got a place here that's what do they call them, Brian? The Pont City Market. There's a fancy term
Food
for
halls?
them, but
it's like a food.
Do they just call it a food hall? But it's got
think
retail and all that, multi-use kind of space. But they're opening, and very exciting, they're adding a distillery to this location. So it's going to be food, beer, and distillery. So exciting to hear that news coming. Looking forward to checking that out for sure.
Fall 2025, apparently.
Fall 2025.
So everything goes to plan.
Let's see how that goes, man. He's done it before, so he knows what he's getting into.
Spring 2026, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, y'all, Thomas, again, thanks for taking some time to join us. I know this is a topic that's very, very close to you, very important to you, but we have a beer bill up in Georgia this year, SB 122. And the short of it is that Georgia's brewers currently, any beer that goes out to market that leaves your brewery for sale anywhere else has to go through a distributor. You cannot distribute any of your beer, even if it's a bar right across the street. We did win, I think, back in 2017. 2018, we had a couple of beer bills, SB 63, SB 85, that did at least give you guys the right to do a little direct sales from your breweries, and there was a big brewery boom in Georgia after that passed. It definitely encouraged more businesses to open and created some jobs there. But now things still aren't where they need to be, Thomas. And we're fighting to get this done. So I'm going to turn this over to you because I know you're much more intimate with this than we are. But fill us in on this, please.
So SB 122. There were 4 different points to it that everybody was looking at. It hit home pretty hard on me. Not only that I had to close one of my locations this year, that really wasn't it, but 2 of my really good friends this last month have had to close their breweries. And one of them was, one of probably the 6th or 7th craft brewery in the state. And to see that happen so quickly, and
Thomas, can I get you to lean toward your mic just a little bit more, sir, so we get better sound from you there? Yes, sir.
Is that better?
Yes,
Sorry.
sir. Thank you.
And with my my friends, with them closing, it really hit home. And so it's one of those things I was like, it is my business, but it's also the people that I care about. And so the four things that we were going for, now we're down to three because we got, I don't know if you know how legislation works. We kind of send it to some people and then a representative will sponsor it. Can you tell I'm Italian? This, uh, so uh, they give us feedback and say, okay, you have a better chance if you do it this way. So the 4 points that we were looking at were self distro, meaning I would be able to take my beers and sell them directly to a retailer, may it be a bar, a restaurant, a package store, a grocery store, whatever. The second one was the daily cap. Right now, we can sell 288 ounces of beer to a person per day. So that equals one case of 12-ounce beers. And what we're asking for is, hey, we would like a little bit more than that. So we get people all the time that come in and say, hey, we got this birthday, we've got a wedding shower, we got this, we love Schoolhouse or whatever, and we'd love to buy one of your kegs. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. So I have to then be a middleman to the retailer, contact a buddy of mine at one of the package stores close to them and say, hey, this person wants a keg, they're going to come in, yada, yada, yada. It's just another step. The third that is still in is we're not unable to actually donate beer to charities. And charitable works is something at Schoolhouse. We want to be, I like to say we're servant leaders. We want to help the community as much as we possibly can. And, you know, cash is king, but it's also what we have to have in our business to keep it running. So at the end of the day, when they come in and say, hey, can you donate a keg for this gala that we're having? And we have to say, no, we can't do it. It has to go through the distributor because it is a three-tiered system. And the fourth was the one that got cut was franchise laws. Right now, we basically sign a contract with our distributors. And for us to get out of that, it's almost a lifetime agreement. There are some provisions in the present day, but I know of one brewery in the state that has gotten out of a franchise clause, and that was due to bankruptcy of the distributor and the brewery. So that was one of the agreements for them to be able to do that, which nobody even likes to say the word bankrupt. In business, it happens, of course. You restructure and that kind of thing, but it's hard. But so we had to cut the franchise law out. And I want to say right now, I love my distributor. My distributor does great. But let's start with the self distro part. We live in a small town called Marietta, Georgia. We have a great square. We've got some of the best beer bars, I think, in the city. There's a couple spots on the square that just kill it. And for me to sell my beer to my friends on the square, the person has to drive from Cumming, Georgia, which is about an hour away, come to my brewery, pick it up, drive it back to Cumming, invoice it, then bring it back to Marietta. So my beer's on a truck for at least 3 hours, plus in their warehouse. And then where I drive by these locations every single night. It doesn't make sense to me. First, let's just talk about everybody's worried about the environment. and especially in Atlanta with the traffic that we have, it doesn't make sense to me. It truly doesn't make sense. I kind of joke with everybody with self distro. If the the restaurant isn't on my way from the brewery to my house, which is about 8 miles, and it's on the right hand side of the road, I'm not self distroing.
Right.
I
And that's something, Thomas, I think, when we get into this, and this isn't going to come as a shock to anybody, but the wholesale distribution lobby is highly opposed to this.
Yes.
And, they're definitely putting things out that are kind of scare tactics on
Yes.
all this, doom and gloom that this change would bring. I understand protecting your business interests, but it's to the detriment of small businesses that this has happened. The distribution lobby has a lot of money. They have a lot of power. And, we have chased down donations before. They definitely have, some of the state legislators in their pockets there. And this is something where, like you said, you love your distributor. We're not trying to do away with distributors here. And there are small breweries that are just getting started up that have had trouble getting a distributor to take them on because they were so small that the distributors thought they just weren't worth the effort. And that puts them in a position, if a distributor does not take them on, their beer doesn't go anywhere. They can't do anything with that. And especially for, we've had a couple startup that are contract brewers or gypsy brewers where they don't really have a tap room to do any kind of direct sales. That just means they can't do sales at all. They can't move their product there. And
to that point, I've been in this game for so long now. There's so many breweries that are opening up. I used to teach at Kennesaw State University a brewing class, and a lot of these, I call them kids, but these new breweries are being opened up. These guys took my class. So they come to me and ask questions. And it's like, how do I get into distribution? And I'm like, well, good luck right now, because there's so many, to Tim's point, is there's so many distributors that are saying, no, we don't want to take on anybody else. I was lucky that we had basically all the distributors wanting us. And, I had a couple points that were non-negotiable. And going back to, I love my distributor. I said, I don't want a franchise. I don't want to be franchised. If you don't like my beer, you can cut me. If you're not doing what I need you to do, I can cut you. And we came to that agreement that, business is business. And if you don't want to do it, but that's not how this works with these bigger guys. We're talking billionaires that we're fighting. A lot of people don't know that one of the distributors in Georgia has one of the largest indoor Hollywood movie studios sitting on their property that they own. The Avengers were shot there. The Marvel Avengers movies were shot there. We're dealing with millionaires and billionaires where we're as brewers are hundredaires.
Thomas, we went to visit one of the distributors one time, and I'm going to say this. I don't mean this in any way to slight them. They were very, very welcoming to us. Very nice. They showed us around and that. But this place was decorated like a 5-star hotel. They had a big education room, meeting room in that. And there were several bars throughout the place that were appointed very well. They weren't strapped for cash is the basic point there. And again, we're not, and Brian, I'll get you. I see you got something to say there, but I just want to say, to make it perfectly clear, there's no hate to the distributors themselves in this. And, there have been some situations where certain distributors, years ago, there was a situation where Clown Shoes Brewing, who's an out-of-state brewery, their distributor decided they didn't want to distribute beer anymore. They were going with wine and liquor. And they're like, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. And they're like, okay, well, release this so we can go to another distributor. And they said no. And that's totally fine. They could do that. They can have the contract and not distribute their beer and still not let them go somewhere else. There's also a case where a brewery made an agreement with the distributor to buy like a batch of beer, like a 40-barrel batch of beer at a certain price. Once that beer was brewed and ready to go, they're like, nah, we can only take 20 barrels and we're only taking it this amount, So, and they can do that. So those are a couple of the things. There are challenges that unfortunately some people take advantage of to the brewers, especially the smaller brewers. Yeah, So, but Brian, you were going to say, sir?
I was going to ask something. You made a comment earlier, Thomas, and it made me think about something that had not crossed my mind before. If you, in the current scheme, if you want to donate a beer to charity, do you have to pay the distributor their cut in order to donate it? Do they have to make some money off of that? Because if that's the case, that is the sleaziest thing I've ever heard in my life. So I just want to
It depends on who it is. Believe it or not, I've had to pay a delivery charge before. So I would have to pay, $50, $60, which people don't understand. Our margins are slim in distro. And when I say slim, we're talking, 20, 30 points. And in business, 20, 30 points is a joke. Nobody would get into a business where unless you were selling widgets at $1 and you were selling 1 billion of them a day. The word distribution and a distributor is what it's meant to do is if you are unable to deliver a product because it is a distance that you can't get to, that's what you use it for. So I don't want to drive beer down to Peachtree City. I really don't. I don't want to drive it to Decatur. Hell, I don't want to drive it to Woodstock. And that's only, 15 miles, 20 miles down the road. I have enough on my plate as a business owner, as a small brewery. I want to be in partners with somebody who's a professional and can do that. But at the end of the day, I also want to be able to choose if I want to do that because it's my business. And the idea that I am beholden to this company because that's what the government says. The only thing can you think of another entity other than beer and pharmaceutical sales where we have to have someone deliver our product, that we are not responsible enough to deliver our product? And that's what they're saying is it's for public safety. I'm sorry. Have you sat on a deck in a brewery? You want to talk about public safety? It's big.
Of the arguments that I've heard from the wholesaler side, none of them hold weight. But that doesn't mean that the people they tell this to are going to. The people will believe it if they tell them, and they tell them with a straight face. They'll say, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that." But it's getting to where, 80, 90 years ago when these laws were created, people believed a lot more things about this kind of stuff, than they did. And I think a lot of people have seen that breweries aren't just a hangout for a bunch of people to get drunk. I mean, that's great, but we've got, talk about Woodstock, even though you hate Woodstock, Thomas, since you don't want to drive up here and bring us beer.
Hates Woodstock.
But we have a brewery here, Reformation Brewery. Shout out to Reformation, but they started many, many years ago. And back in the days, Thomas, where the laws were in Georgia, you open an industrial space because that's what made sense to do. You got the cheapest real estate you could because it didn't matter if you had foot traffic because you couldn't sell to them anyhow. But they've grown with the town. They're a fixture of the community. And that is not something that is, specific to Woodstock. There's many places. Roswell down the street from us, Variant Brewing, fixture, Gate City and Variant, both very important to their downtown culture. That thrives there. We've got Good Word Brewing over in Duluth, Georgia, who partners with the city to put on some great festivals. So breweries contribute a lot more to their communities than just beer. And, and yes, they are gathering places to get together and do things. And we want to see them succeed. And Thomas, we know that the craft beer industry as a whole right now is in a challenging period. We know we had a big boom, and we're seeing the repercussions of that. I think they say Gen Z doesn't like carbonation. People aren't drinking as much beer. People are smoking more weed. There's a lot of challenges. So we're not saying that this is the absolute only reason that breweries are closing, but it sure is not helping that you would keep more of your money in your pocket if you could do a little bit of self distro. And another thing, Thomas, these small breweries, you're small, but not tiny, I would say, Thomas.
We're growing. We're growing each year. So I'm very proud of that. But yes.
But you get a small brewery with gosh, I know there's some breweries around here that seriously, they've got like a 3-barrel brew house or something.
Mm-hmm.
There. You know what? Our buddies at Antiquated Brewing, they've got a very tiny brew house there. And, they can't brew a volume that makes sense to load it onto trucks and drive it all over town. But as they get to growing some, if they wanted to send something, you know what? They're just down the street from Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Maybe if they were allowed to take a few kegs over there, more people would discover their beer. People would go to their brewery and drink their beer. People would want their beer out there. And then they grow to a point where they do need a distributor because now they've got a bigger brew house. And now they don't want to just get stuff down the street to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They want to get it up to, they want to compete with you on the shelves up there in Marietta, Thomas.
And I think it's great.
Sure.
I love the idea that there's more variety in this whole thing. And the whole thing of there's ebb and flow in all businesses. Good friend of mine once told me, there's a difference between a trend and a fad. A fad is like those cupcake communities, so that's cupcake stores. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
They were on every single corner, but a trend sticks around. Starbucks coffee is a trend. It's going to be around forever. It's just, what does it look like? And we have the ability to take this and say, hey, don't limit my barrier of entry or the ability for me to be successful. And that's where I get really turned on this. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. Let us do business. And the state of Georgia is always talking about it's the best place to be a small business. It is. It's amazing to be a small business in Georgia. However, when the president of the wholesalers committee, their lobbyist, said, we feel really bad for these breweries, but just because a brewery closes doesn't mean we have to change the laws. It's not a brewery. We're talking about almost 10% of the breweries closed last year. Put that in perspective. Put that number in perspective. 10% in the last year. Because, heck, we saw 3 of them close this week.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that Thomas, what was it, 15 last year, Brian? 3 so far this year.
That's what's being reported. 15 last year. Yeah.
Reminder: we're not even through. We're not even through the month of February yet. So we've already had 3 close. But there's breweries that impacted by these laws because we have had some changes. But we were talking, Thomas. You come on Reddit. We're doing on the Reddit ATL beer. We're doing a beer history, revisiting some of our breweries of the past there. And a recent one that we featured was 5 Seasons Brewing. And Crawford Moran was one of the founders of 5 Seasons. Crawford and John Roberts and, Spike from Terrapin. And, Terrapin grew up to be a huge brewery that, they sold to big beer, but they started by a couple of guys in a garage brewing beer, just like a lot of these other places did. But they've closed. Through the problems with the laws. And, we've seen Red Brick Brewing, which at one time was the oldest operating brewery in Georgia. They were Red Brick and they were Atlanta Brewing Company and then back to one of the others. But, we've seen Anderby. We've seen Back Paddle, good folks over in East Georgia there. We've seen Best End very recently that closed. It's down in an area, bigger staff. There's a lot of challenges outside of distribution. And I think that's something that the distributors like to focus on and say, well, it's not this. It's not this. They can't blame this on us. Well, it's not everything that's contributing to it, but it sure doesn't hurt to make that better. And like you said, remove one of the barriers there. Make it a little bit easier.
If you're taking 5 or 10% or whatever of the money made off of the product every single time, all the time, and like, well, you should have done better. You should have made more money. I'm like, or maybe you should get out of the way. Why are you even there? If they could have survived without you and gotten by, then it's ridiculous and heartless, and I'm still stuck on the fact that you have to pay them for charity beers, but I'll get beyond that eventually. But
Brian's still mad about
that. I'm angry about that. I'm like, they are collecting money off of a charity beer. Shame on you. There's shame on you. Everything else you say is irrelevant. You're just horrible.
Well, anyway. So here's it's not just self-distro. I want everybody to understand. Please understand, this is not about just about self-distro. This is about respect and understanding that we're not children. That the wholesalers say, well, we pay taxes on it. Well, so do we. We pay excise taxes on every beer that's sold in our tap room. Did you know this, though? The brewery is the only one that pays the federal excise tax. The distributors don't.
I did not know that.
So we pay more taxes than the distributors. So your argument that you're making sure that the government gets paid, I could say a couple of choice words. I know this is a family-friendly show. But the other side to that is, I go back and say, it's not just about antiquated laws. It's about treating us with the due respect of true business people and being able to say, hey, we're able to pay our taxes. The whole public safety thing, making sure that no kid gets beer. Do you think that we're just slinging beers to anybody that walks in?
Thomas wants the right to deliver to the local daycare.
The retailers have to card people. The retailers are enforcing that. The distributors aren't doing a stinking thing about that. I bet you they don't card a single person when they drop off beer. So that's just BS.
Can confirm they do not.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's such a lie.
Never carded anybody.
Lie. Everything is such a lie.
Thomas, you commented that it's not only about antiquated beer laws, but these are antiquated laws. We're talking nearly 100 years old where these.
Oh, no, these are prohibition laws. These are truly prohibition laws.
And I'm not sure if people know really why the 3-tier system got into place. And Thomas, I've read up on this. I think I have all of these notes, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But way back before the 3-tier distribution system, there was an issue where large companies had what they called tied houses. Yes. And basically you would have a big, powerful company that owned production, distribution, and sales. And it even got to the point like pre-prohibition, they started doing kind of baby steps into it to where you had to have a special license to operate there. And it got to the point where these licenses were crazy expensive. And it was really done to discourage someone having a saloon or a bar. Well, you'd have John Smith's Brewing Company come in and said, hey, I tell you what, I'll pay for your license, but you only serve my beer. And they're like, okay, because the other option was you close your doors there. So they would cover the license, but they basically owed them. They were tied to them through that. So these laws, when they were created, at least on the surface, they were supposed to protect you from having these tied houses and to make a more competitive landscape within the beer. How they got to the point to where you've got these franchise laws where a distributor owns you, and it's really right back to the point where the distributors have all the power. I don't know, but they were put into place to kind of prohibit what they're doing now by having that level of control over anybody there.
Yes. So pre-prohibition, that's how it started. It was more of the keep the oligarchy in line kind of thing. But in post prohibition, and I can't speak to all the distributors in Georgia, but I can speak to. I'm from North Carolina, home of NASCAR, and I'm going to tie this in. NASCAR started because these were bootleggers, and they started running beer, and they started racing, and then they raced and raced and raced and raced and raced, and then prohibition got nixed. They still wanted to race, right? Does that make sense? Well,
I'm with you.
So, but the people that were making the liquor, the government went to them and said, hey, you're not going to be able to keep moonshining. You're not going to be able to be a bootlegger any longer. However, how about this? We'll give you a license, and you are the only ones that can deliver the beer, the wine, the spirits to different locations. You will be the distributor. So the bootleggers, the moonshiners said, okay, that's great, but we have some provisions. And those provisions would be franchise laws that the price, I mean, truly, the price of a distribution license is crazy. It truly is. And the argument that they're protecting me from macro breweries, I'll tell you, the Budweiser plant in Cartersville has no want nor need to distribute their own beer. They have a hard enough time to make sure that I think I have a friend that works in the logistics part of that. They send out like 18 tractor trailer trucks of Budweiser per week to Atlanta only.
Not surprising. Yeah.
Not surprising, but they can't deliver that beer.
No, and they don't want to. That's the same thing with, you know, you know what? You may have some breweries that decide they're like, hey, we can self-distribute. Well, then we want to own the distribution channel as well. But I don't know the exact provisions in the bill, Thomas, but they are looking to put limitations on this. They're not just trying to take this totally away from the distributors, correct?
I agree. It's 100-mile radius, which I think that's even just a crazy number, because 100-mile radius, if you really think about that, that's
a lot.
Almost the state.
Right. You're doing a lot. Probably not. Most brewers won't care to do that.
No chance anybody's going to actually find that a restriction that they can't get past. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's and we're also looking at caps of not as great as even North Carolina. Like North Carolina, you can distribute up to, I think it's 30,000 barrels. I mean, that's a lot of liquid, gentlemen.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many breweries. We probably only have a few breweries in Georgia that brew that in an entire year. So
you would probably be surprised. There is.
I know we got Creature, Scofflaw, Sweetwater.
Nah, Sweetwater is probably the only one.
Over 30,000. I know I saw some heavy numbers. So there you go. That's
one of the important things, I think. We're talking about self-distributions, and like we're arguing about it as though like we can handle it. Well, here's the thing, and this is an important thing that I saw Joseph Cortez, the director of the Craft Brewers Association for Georgia, mentioned recently in an interview. There are 40 states out there, including the District of Columbia, that all have allowed for self-distribution, and the distributors are doing fine in those states. The kids aren't, getting alcohol poisoning and dying in the streets like randomly. And no, this is an established thing that works in 40 other states and the District of Columbia. So this is a thing that we can handle as human beings here in the U.S.
That's one of those things where the distributor's like, well, this isn't right. This will never work. And it's like, well, I don't know how they figured it out in the other 40 states then.
Yeah,
seriously. It's like, someone's figured out how to make it work. Guys, we need to take a quick break and thank our sponsor. Brian, let's give a shout out to our friends at Truck and Tap.
Yes. So our first fall spring has come and gone in Georgia, and with it, my desire for tiki drinks has disappeared. So this week I'm heading over to Truck and Tap. I'm looking for some good winter beers. And they have plenty to choose from because they always do. Heck, they're even posting about it being stout season on social media. So they're ready. So without any further ado, here are my beer picks for this week. At Truck and Tap Woodstock, I'm going with Pontoon's King Otter. It's a bourbon barrel-aged stout with vanilla beans, maple, and toasted coconut that pushes the state's ABV limits of 13.9%. It's totally technically legal. I'm getting warm just thinking about it, and also possibly getting a cavity. At the Duluth location, I'm getting Allagash Triple because it's hard to beat a good Belgian triple, and Allagash is going to nail it. This strong golden ale with notes of banana and honey clocks it at a warm 9% ABV. You'll be warm the whole evening after that. At Truck and Tap Alpharetta, I'm switching things up. This is going to be, I'm going off the script here. My pick is Magnanimous's Whistledown. It's a 5% ESB. And it's because I can't not try an ESB when I see one on tap because I have a lot of love for the style. They say it has a nutty, toasty, and caramel notes, which sounds great to me. And heck, when I'm done with that afterwards, I can always spring for a spicy pour of Oaxaca Chaca, which is also on tap there. And finally, at the Lawrenceville location, I'm going with Untitled Arts Dark Chocolate Truffle. It's a rich imperial stout with cocoa notes and subtle roastiness, and it has plenty of ABVs to keep you warm. I think it's around 10. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't write it down. But there's no need to fear the cold at Truck and Tap. Between the big warm stouts and the warm hospitality and the actual indoor heating, you'll be plenty cozy. And you know what else is hot? The food from the day's food truck. And you're going to want a little of that after you sip on some of those stouts. So for all the details about beer, food trucks, events, and more, check out truckandtap.com. And thank you to Truck and Tap for your continued warm support.
Thank you, Truck and Tap. We appreciate you. So, guys, Nate got us some stats here talking about breweries. So, Thomas, yeah, you may be surprised here. Creature, Sweetwater, and Scofflaw are over the 30,000 barrels. You got Sweetwater at two something here. My screen's blocked. 227. Creature at 63,000. Scofflaw at 56,000. And New Realm is chasing that number at 26,000. But you look at that jump from the top three down from there. New Realm's not a small brewery either. They do a lot of distribution. So, that's a lot of beer.
They do. And one of the things that I can say, Carrie and Mitch are really good friends of mine over there. And they, as a brew pub, they almost had to close their doors in the last month of the year. I think it was 2023, because they were approaching the cap on how much they could sell direct to the public.
I remember that. I remember talking about that. Right.
That could you imagine the biggest month of everybody's year, the one that truly gets you through January and February as a business person in this business, and you had to close it down because there was state government saying you're selling too much.
Too much. It's not good for the children. Can't do it. Can't do it.
But you're getting taxes on it. I just cannot imagine. I'm actually going to do this hopefully next week, as I'm going to do a man on the street video and go up to people and say, hey, what do you think if the government said I could only sell you 100 of a product that you wanted, but you really wanted 1,000 of the products, and then explain the law to
them? Like,
them.
what?
Yeah.
What?
I can't give my product to a charity because charities are bad.
What's your product? Cocaine.
That's right.
Oh, wait, no. Close enough, some people. Thomas, so the SB 122 here in Georgia this year, we're fighting for a few changes. One of them being the right to do a little bit of self-distribution, not try to kill the distributors. The right to donate your beer to charitable events. It's for a good cause, y'all. It's not going to hurt anybody to donate a little bit of beer there. And then did you say, Thomas, is lifting the to-go sales cap, is that still in there, or was that the piece?
Yeah, the cap is still we still have the cap as part of this, but it's the franchise
the daily
law.
sales.
The daily sales
cap?
is
Okay.
still
Gotcha.
in the bill. The franchise clause has been removed. And I get it. I don't get it. I
don't.
kind of
It
get
sounds
it.
ridiculous to me. It just doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make a lick of sense at all. I know that there has to be negotiations with these kind of things, but that's ridiculous if they leave the franchise law the way it is. But
follow the money.
Not making laws. Thomas, what can consumers, what can people who love craft beer, what in the world can we do to impact this law? Getting this to be a law.
So, what first, believe it or not, it's not contacting our legislator right now. We've got a couple things going on in the legislation. Tort reform is one of them, and it's the biggest thing in the state right now. I don't know if you guys follow any of the state laws or anything like that, but tort reform for medical malpractice, that kind of thing. That bandwidth is so big right now. So we will let you know when to bombard the legislators. But the one thing that we all need to do is, if you know a councilman, a mayor, a person at the Chamber of Commerce, any business organization that has a lobby, start reaching out to them. We're calling this the grass top movement, not the grassroots movement. Grassroots is when I'm calling you guys and saying, hey, contact everybody. And trust me, everybody's going to know when I say that, because I will let everybody know when to contact. But what we really need to do is start local and hitting, like I said, your councilmen that have the ear to their buddy who's in the legislature, and they have a little bit more pull, believe it or not, than we do. So start there, start talking to other businesses, start just let everybody know. The other thing you can do is, on your social media feed, if you follow a brewery or if you follow anybody in this business, like their post, comment on their post, forward their posts. It will get all, believe it or not, the algorithm will then start throwing, when we start talking about this and making TikTok or making reels and all that, it will reach out to more people. And when more people see it, give you an example. I've been doing a series on what this bill is. So follow us on Schoolhouse Beer, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Only Farmers, a couple other. If you've almost 70% of the people who have watched these videos that I've made are non-followers of Schoolhouse Beer. So Schoolhouse Brewing. So I'm getting that information out. People just need to know, in this day and age, they're sick of big government telling us what to do. And I'm not trying to get political here. I know this is a political commentary, but everybody's talking about they're sick of big government getting in their way. 70 cents from every dollar that you spend in a brewery goes back to your local community. So
keep the money local. So, Thomas, we want to reach out to our local authorities. We want to reach out to our local businesses. We want to follow social media, like and share those posts. Awareness is a thing right now. So, Georgia SB 122, we're trying to improve the beer laws, make things easier for Thomas so people can keep coming to his brewery, drinking beer and playing some pinball and having a good time. So good stuff there, Thomas. Appreciate you sharing. And Brian, I think we have a couple other things we're going to cover here, some interesting news, but we've got politics, big thing, man, big thing. And I know we have the power of beer behind us, but in Germany, there's actually a city that's trying to get voters in with beer.
Oh, yeah. So free beer and non-alcoholic drinks were offered to early voters in the German city of I'm going to say this word. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but Duisburg. They limited the offer to an area of the city that had low voter turnout in the past, which is smart. But they weren't actually handing you a pint when you walked in with your ballot. They gave you a voucher if you voted by 2 p.m. local time as an early voter, which you could then use at a nearby beer cart to get a beer. It's too early at this point to know if how effective the strategy was, because it happened like last weekend, I think, or maybe the weekend before last. But it's being reported that 80 people showed up in the first hour to take advantage of the free beer offer. And from the sound of it, that was a big turnout for this particular area of Duisburg. I know that would never fly here in the U.S. because people have gotten into trouble just handing out bottles of water to people standing in line in the heat and in certain voting conditions. But it's such a great idea. If you want to actually get people out, like, give them a beer afterwards,
It's too bad that things like this that we just talked about with the beer laws is not something that can be voted on by people.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, can you imagine? It's like, should this business have the right to distribute the products it creates? And they're like, why do we even need to vote on this? It would.
The answer already. Why are you asking us?
Yeah,
do what's obviously right.
Yeah, I think, Thomas, did you do the thing like during the presidential elections? If they brought in their "I voted" sticker, you get. I know I saw several breweries they give away. I think there were tacos given away, and some breweries did. We'll give you a pint if you wear your "I voted" sticker, things like that. So maybe not encouraging them to vote on the front end, but a little
rewarding them after the fact for doing it. There's nothing wrong with that, because you're not at that point. They've already casted their vote. You're not pressuring them one side or the other. They're just going to show up with their sticker. They're going to tell you who they voted for.
I get in enough trouble with my views and my I stir the pot way too much. So some days it's good that Justin's around, that he sets my sail in the right direction.
Checking and balancing. Gotta have those.
Somebody has to.
Good stuff, man. Well, Brian, one more story. I think this is.
He may have frozen.
We may have lost him.
If he's doing that naturally, this is amazing.
Very, very impressive. We'll give him a second and see if he comes back. Does not look like it.
Brian?
Yes.
What final story would you like to have for the show?
I'm thinking the direction Tim was going is an interesting story we have about PETA being in hot water about making some health claims. This is easily the weirdest story of the week. In a YouTube video recently, PETA claimed that the beer consumption can prevent bone loss and osteoporosis due to its silicon content. And in moderation, they say, this is a quote from the actual video, in moderation, beer is healthier than cow's milk, unquote. And again, I'm not making this claim. That's them saying it. I don't want to get in trouble too. Of course, medical experts are calling the ad a dangerous misrepresentation of the facts. Apparently, that Parish beer is catching up with me. And they emphasize that alcohol is actually a risk factor for osteoporosis. The PETA ad likely gets its ideas from a published study in the Journal of Science of Food and Agriculture, which analyzes the levels of silicon in 100 commercial beers from North America and Europe. What the story does not do is attempt in any way to connect the silicon they find in beer to bone health or bone density. The study found that beers contain an average of 29.4 milligrams per liter of silicon, with IPAs having the highest content at 41.2 milligrams per liter of silicon. So, like, if you're interested in the amount of silicon in beer, like, that's a strategy for you. If that's something you're into, drink IPAs. While it's possible that there is some positive connection between silicon and beer and bone health, at the moment there is no study that I'm aware of that anybody talked about illustrating such a connection. So experts recommend that if you are looking to up the silicon in your diet, you should focus on getting it from whole grains and vegetables instead of beer. And as I am only a doctor of intoxicology, I'm not qualified to make a recommendation one way or the other. So I would recommend you do what the experts tell you and eat your grains and eat your vegetables. I think that's the smart approach here. So
I think Pete is right.
you think they're right? You know what? I'm not going to make that claim. I don't want to get in trouble. Like I think that claiming the beer is better for you than cow's milk is a bit scary. So
yeah, that's a little
But
Good
anyway, I think that about wraps it up for us. We are at time at this point, and want to thank you for listening. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us and filling us in on SB 122, I believe it was. And we look forward to talking to you again next week. And always remember to drink your local beers, man.
Cheers.
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 That was a fun end of the show, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Oh boy.
Looks like Tim is not happy.
But we did it. Yeah, we had a little BSOD question for Tim tonight.
Yes.
Sorry about that, folks. But we recovered. Turned out really well.
Yeah, I think we're good. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we should sign off at this point, and we will talk to our Patreon folks afterwards in the after party, and yeah, we'll catch you guys next week.
Cheers.